always learning and growing, attracting the right people, and keeping your vision in focus every day. This is the Brian Covey Show.
What's happening, guys? Welcome back to another edition of the Brian Covey Show. So today, I am honored, and you are going to know why I'm saying that, because Chuck Garcia is joining us, and I think it's fitting for this time of the year, kicking off a new year. Chuck has experience that you guys are going to want to take a pen and paper and notes. Not only is he an author, he's got his own radio show. He has this leadership journey that he'll share with you. He's a professor. He's a mountaineer, so he gets out in the adventure. And he really is one of those guys that I have come to become very fond of in the way that he lives life on purpose. And so we're going to unpack some things that I think a lot of us struggle with today, which is how do we actually live a life on purpose, but how do we understand where we're going in our own leadership journey to lead ourselves and to lead others powerfully. And I will tell you, today is going to be one of those that you're going to want to take notes and you're going to have actionable steps you can leave the show with today and actually go change your life and make sure you're living your best life. So Chuck, welcome, my friend.
No, Brian, it is an honor, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. I'm humbled.
Well, I'll tell you this. So when we were on your show and I got to know you, and obviously the introduction with 2 Market Media, I love meeting people like yourself that not only did you inspire me, you educated me a little bit, you got me to think a little bit differently. And I think that's what our audience will be in for today, is that treat of, if you can do those things every day, that's how you continue to learn and grow. And your story is an interesting one, right? And you do a lot of things. As I was going through and prepping, and probably people are listening to the intro going, hold on, what does Chuck not do? The part that I love, so we just left Beaver Creek on a vacation. We're out there in the mountains and just enjoying it. And I love that couple mornings we were out there, no one was else on the runs early in the morning, right? And it's just quiet. The snow's coming down. You climb pretty crazy high mountains. You've done some pretty big adventures. I'd love to start with, how did you get into that? And then what was really, why did you do that?
Yeah, well, first, thank you, Brian, for, at least for the opportunity to be on your show. But also, thank you for giving me a moment of self-reflection that I hope that whatever my story does to inspire others to climb their own mountains, be them physical or proverbial, that's what I set out to do every day. My journey as a mountaineer was, I don't want to say it's accidental, but it was opportunistic in that it was in response to a tragic event. And in my career, I spent so many years as a public spokesman for a company called Bloomberg. And Mike Bloomberg was the mayor of New York for 3 terms. He ran for president, and he is one of the richest men in the world, but that's not who he is. Who he is the smartest, most generous man I've ever known. And I was incredibly privileged to be working under his tutelage. As the public spokesman for his company, I spent many years on a stages all over the world, communicating the brand of the company that I was paid to represent. And at the time, it was Bloomberg. On September 11th, 2001, I was scheduled to speak in an event space and restaurant called Windows of the World, which is on the 107th floor of the World Trade Center. And on that full day that everybody in my world knows where they were that day, at 3 o'clock that afternoon, I was going to be on that stage. Wow. As fate would have it, at 9 o'clock that morning, the world changed, and I had not yet made it into the building. However, I lost 3 of my colleagues, and 2 were 24 and 1 was 22 years old. And the hardest phone calls I ever made was to those parents to tell them, your children in the World Trade Center in the service of me and in the service of my company. And I also attended 16 memorials and funerals throughout the course of the next weeks. Brian, when I thought about that event, that whatever force is up in heaven, wherever that may be, it was my day to die. And my parents, my wife and children thought I was dead. My company thought I was dead. I was on a dead list for 4 hours because I was unaccounted for. Wow. When I thought about in the moment of introspection, Brian, when I was like, oh my goodness, why was I fortunate enough to survive when other people didn't? I couldn't dwell on it. What I could do is, what am I going to do about it? And so I gave thought to my life. I gave introspection. All right, what can I do? If nothing else, I do in the service of the people that I lost that should not have that day. And I didn't know the answer to that. No, but over some self-reflection, I had read a book just before that called Into Thin Air, which was an account of a disaster on Mount Everest. And as tragic as that event was, I saw myself in that book. I saw myself climbing the mountains. I saw myself working in the spirit, in the service of other people. And I said, that's it. I grew up in a world of ice skating and skiing. I'd always been gravitated to the cold weather. And I said, Brian, I am going to do something I've never done before. In fact, on that day, I made up my mind. From here on in, I am going to do things I've never done. That's what I'm going to do. And at first, I'm going to do that to honor the spirit of the people in my life that should be alive. And even though this is a long story, to shorten it, exactly 1 year later, on 9/11/02, and the funny thing is I didn't pick that date, date picked me. I stood on the summit of Mount Rainier. It just happened to be the weekend that I was available to climb it. And I went out to the Cascade Mountains in Washington State, and I did my goal to do something I've never done. And I had trained 6 months earlier with a company called REI that taught me to rock climb. They taught me to ice climb. And I said, here I am. I'm now doing something I've never done. And I climbed Mount Rainier. And when I did it, Brian, when you get to the summit of a mountain, there's a logbook. And you sign in the logbook, and this is 14,400 feet up. There's a pen and a piece of paper and a book on that summit. And most people put in their name and they say, you know, we made it 8 o'clock in the morning. We had climbed all night. And I logged in the name of my colleagues I had lost. I put their name. I didn't put mine because they were there with me and everybody else in my life. And I just thank God for my family, for my parents. And as I was descending, Brian, it was like, oh my God. It was the most exhausted I've ever felt, and I've run marathons, but this was beyond anything I'd ever thought. But Brian, that physical manifestation of what I had just done was anything but physical. It was from the heart, it was from the mind, and it completely changed the way I saw myself and what it is I decided to do for the remainder of my life. So from that event, Brian, I then climbed Kilimanjaro, the Matterhorn. I've climbed Mount Elbrus, which is Europe's highest mountain. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, Africa's highest mountain. But all of that, Brian, ultimately led me to climbing on a mountain in Alaska called Mount Bona. And that was about 9 years ago. And that's when I made the strategic, conscious decision that for the rest of my life, I'm going to leave the Wall Street world behind, not totally, because I'm a consultant to many companies. From here on in, Brian, I am going to spend the rest of my days waking up every day in the service of someone else's success.
Wow. So I believe there's no coincidences as you're sharing that story. And I knew bits and pieces, but you filled in some of the gaps in there that I love the way you tell the story too, because I went on this emotional ride with you. And for anybody listening, I think for all of us, there are events that have happened, maybe not as tragic as that, and you have to go through, but there's got to be this pivotal moment in your life that you say, you know what, enough with what I've heard or what other people have told me I need to do with my life. I'm going to go live my life with intention and purpose. And I love the way you said you're facing your fears. What advice would you give people today as we're entering this new year? And I think about a lot of people. I mean, Chuck, they're making New Year's resolutions, all these things they want to do. They want this better life. The last 2 years has been to hell and back for most people. There's been, a lot of chaos. What advice would you give them about how to take that first step? How to just get into the game of where they want to go?
Yeah, well, first, let me start whatever I can advise here by what not to do. And I think the dumbest thing that people do is making New Year's resolutions. So I see it all the time. 95% of them don't work. And why do we need a new year to resolve anything? You need a new day. You can wake up tomorrow and say, you know what, I'm going to resolve to climb a mountain. And who's stopping me? The other thing I would say is many people are struggling with either career, life, and I get that. I appreciate all of that. But my first piece of advice, don't wait for a tragedy to spark moments of introspection to change your life. Mm-hmm. The second thing I would say, I live in a world, and I teach at Columbia University, and I have wonderful students, but many of them are busy living the life of someone else's expectations. Yes. And while that might work in the short term, making mom and dad happy, whatever that may be, ultimately, over the long course of our lives, that does not work. I think when people try to do what they do in their lives to meet external expectations, you lose a sense of yourself. And I think it's the heart, it's the thing inside of us that causes us to endure. And what I find often is most people don't need to be told what to do, but I think they need to be inspired to do it because they lack the courage to actually do what I decided to do in my life. From here on in, I am going to do things I've never done before. Yeah. And when you do that, it requires an enormous courage to be wrong often. Yeah. But because you're going to fail and you're going to stumble. And I'll summarize that advice by saying, first of all, it's okay not to be okay.
That's right.
It is okay to screw up. And we strive when we climb proverbial mountains for progress, not perfection. Forgive yourself for not being perfect. Lighten up a little bit, as I had to do for myself, and recognize that if you just take a step, you're in pretty good ground. Sun came up the next day, take another one.
Yeah.
And then, if that's okay, keep going. But many people hear that advice, Brian, but often they feel like, oh my God, there's this fear and anxiety. What will others say? What will happen in the unknown? But I think life is just one big act of self-discovery. But the only way to tap your true potential is to try to discover the thing that you suck at. And then try it.
Yes.
What do you have to lose?
Oh, I can relate. I was sharing this story. It's funny you bring this up. I was sharing the story with someone actually yesterday. And they were talking about, I used to be, professional soccer player, all that stuff. So I thought I was a great athlete. Years ago, I was humbled, like literally humbled. I went into a gym and it was CrossFit with one of my friends who invited me. And I thought, I was a professional athlete. I've done insanity. I've run marathons. I've done all this stuff. I go in there, Chuck, I couldn't do half the movements, if probably not 90% of them.
I mean, you know what, Brian? That's a good thing.
Great thing. And I love, that was a spark. And when you're saying that about doing things that you're not good at, that you suck at and all that, that has led me on a path of, almost to your point, self-discovery of what other things can I not do? How can I be challenging my body one day at a time? And so I love that, because I'm on that same journey and belief of, yes, I'm living a healthy lifestyle. I'm not thinking about the entire year or all these resolution things. I'm like, what am I going to do today? It's going to be challenging, that I'm probably going to want to quit at some point because it's hard enough to test me and mentally and physically, but I'm going to do it anyway. And we use a term called embrace the suck in our group. And
I like it.
As you're saying that, I thought, you know what? A lot of people, we see things on social media, especially today. We see people that are successful, and we don't hear behind the scenes, the things like you said, like where people start. And I'd love to kind of unpack this, because this is an area of your expertise. I'm fascinated. I want to try to learn some more and share with the audience. I think there's somewhere in here, and you tell me if I'm on the right path, of the emotional intelligence side that seems to still be even lacking is we're having conversations with people. Some have understood this concept. It's been out for a while. Some don't even know what it is. So I'd love to kind of unpack some of that and how it relates into this and help people in their journey with that specific area.
Yeah, you bet. And I love this one because I think it's either unknown or misunderstood. And let me put that into context. My career was very much based on my ability to speak in a powerful way on a stage. And with that, when you learn the art and science of communication, and it was self-taught, I didn't have anybody guiding me, although I wish I did. What I came to find out is when I tried to work with other people in the course of my Wall Street career to do what I did in the event that I was unavailable, what I found was enormous anxiety. Oh my God, what if I get the wrong word? What if I stand wrong? And I said, well, what's stopping you? What do you know? But I say that, Brian, because I think in the educational model, this is the biggest missing component. How do any of us stay calm under the weight of great expectations? Because no matter how brilliant you may be, I have seen brilliant people fall off the rails because they didn't know, not from anything bad necessarily, they were never taught or conditioned, how do I perform under the weight of those expectations and maintain my composure? Now, you as an athlete, And when we watch Tom Brady or whoever on that television, they're all equally skilled, but why is it that some of them can do in the 2-minute drill better than others? Yeah. It's not the skill set. It's the heart and it's the mindset able to stay calm under the weight of enormous pressure. Our careers are different because anybody's individual career, you're Tom Brady. You are under the weight of your own expectations. Right. And it's important to you. It's what's at stake. It's no less important than a guy throwing a ball in a Super Bowl. But here's where the emotional intelligence comes in. I can teach 99% of the people to step on a stage and to speak in powerful and compelling ways. I do it at the executive level for many financial institutions, and I teach at Columbia. But what I had to learn, and maybe because I've always been pretty good at it, how did I learn my own way to be able to stay calm and to be able to keep my composure? So what I found, Brian, in the evolution of my leadership development practice, I teach a lot of executives to do that half that I'm describing of public speaking. But here's where the second half came in. And this is where emotional intelligence is a critical component of understanding yourself first. Out of the 7 habits of highly effective people, seeking first to understand, and then second, to be understood. I love that. My favorite habit in that book. Yeah. But I say that to our audience because the educational model teaches you to try to be a perfect machine technically. What it does not, that's your mind. What it does not address is the heart and the beats and the increasing speed of your heart when you start to get nervous. You as an athlete understand how to calm that heart. And we teach that to soccer players, football players, marathoners, myself, and mountaineers. We have no choice but how to control the conditioning of the pace of our heart in order to endure the enormous journey we're about to go on, because it's a series of beats, one steady beat. When you speak in a career, or no matter what that career is, it's different. It's a series of beats. But if you beat too fast, not unlike an engine revving in a car, you're going to run out of gas. This, Brian, is the gap. And this is what I hope I can inspire our readers to recognize. In college, you're getting a test based on a cram, exam, regurgitate model.
Right.
In your career, you're getting a test of something completely different. Every day in our careers, we have a test of adaptability, a test of endurance, and the ability to get along with other people. That's our test. You can choose to be good at this or not, but these are earned behaviors. How then do we do all of this and stay calm, steady beats? Hence the topic of emotional intelligence. And here's the most interesting part, Brian. For any of our listeners, you recognize this network that we use called LinkedIn. There are 55 million companies, and I mean that number literally. 55 million companies around the world that use it in some way to advertise for their job postings. And every year, LinkedIn publishes 2 rather important lists. The top 10 hard skills most in demand that appear on job descriptions. Cloud computing, artificial intelligence, things you'd expect.
Sure.
My favorite, the top 10 soft skills list. Wow. Think about what the top 5 are. Now, we go to college majoring in finance, biology, whatever that is, and here's what the list is and has nothing to do with it. That's the right. Number 1 soft skill that appears on LinkedIn is creativity. Imagine that. Now, we tend to think as we're growing up that this is for the musicians and the visual artists. You got to be kidding me. This is for guys, all of us, because this is where we differentiate.
Yeah.
Number 2, persuasion. Right out of Carnegie's books, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Oh my God, that's not biology, anthropology, finance, accounting. Persuasion. Who knew? Man. Number 3, madness, collaboration. They're actually stating in their job description the importance of working with other people.
Yes.
Who knew? Now, let's fill in the blanks, Brian, because this is my favorite part. Number 4, your ability to be adaptable. They're not teaching you that in school. And number 5, my favorite, emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
So let me stop there just to put into perspective what the marketplace is demanding of the people who are listening to this show is not what is being taught in the schools. And it's not the school's fault. It's a conventional model now in an unconventional world. So really what that list does, it's bridging the gap between what we are taught throughout the hundreds of years of educational evolution, which is good. Yeah. But now, as the world is shifting faster than the model's ability to adapt to the changing world, I think this is an enormity of advice for anyone who wants to know, how do I cross the bridge from the conventions to what the new world demands when 85% of the job market is going to be shifting by 2030? Well, I'm not suggesting stop focusing on accounting and finance and biology. Those are all good things. That's hard skills. It's half of your brain.
Right.
But I'm suggesting the leadership brain is the other half of the brain. We do not bring our whole selves to work because we have not learned to exercise or conditioned the behaviors that are required from the right side of your brain. So we're only half as effective as we should be. The people that work with me, I teach the whole self. Left brain, they got damn well. Right brain, completely missing. They figured it out a little bit. That's the gap.
Oh, so somebody listening to this today, we're going to dive into what you offer, because I think for some people, they're sitting there chuckling like, man, I get it. Like what you're talking about, that's me. I'm the person that, like, I don't have that training. I don't have that expertise. You're going through those 5 soft skills, and I'm thinking to myself, where is this taught? Right. And that was part of why we launched the podcast, right? We started doing things. It's right. It's so unconventional today. What would you advise them on where to start their journey, just to have an understanding? Because I think what you said is, I have conversations with people that they're not even aware of these things as being needed or what they are and how they are so important today in their success.
Yeah. Well, let me first just to offer some perspective. I'm an executive coach to lots of financial institutions, and if you drive around New York or the world and you see these big branded names, I work with many of those companies. Yeah. But here's the interesting part: in 2 of the companies, I led what was called the succession plan, and for 2 different projects that I was on, the CEO of each respective companies, and they were parallel. One was a Canadian company, and one was an American company. And it was interesting to note the similarities in the succession plan. I was the individual, the executive performance coach that stood between the board of directors and the current CEO, who had said, both of them males, they both said, I am resigning in 12 to 18 months. Part of my responsibility as CEO and to work with the board is to pick a successor. Chuck, wow. Could you help us? We need someone to facilitate the process because we want input from the company. What do you want from your next CEO? A very cool thing. Companies that were actually saying you have input, not into necessarily the individual, but right. We don't want you to feel like you need to be led because you have to comply to what it is we are telling you to do. We want you to purposely and to choose the characteristics of the individuals that you wish to follow. Imagine that. Leadership and followership, and now we're giving you an opportunity to give us the input. How do you want to be led? Cool projects.
Love it.
This was the most interesting part, and for anyone that has CEO aspirations and ambitions, take out your pen and write this down because it's a very simple framework. Brian, as we were working through, and it was interesting to note 2 different cultures, both American-speaking or English-speaking countries, one American and Canadian, but characteristically what I was finding, and they don't know each other, they have nothing to do with each other, but the similarities were striking. So as we were going through the surveys, what do you want? In one of these projects, we asked there were 1,500 employees, and we came back with 34 different attributes of what they wanted out of their next CEO. Nobody can live up to 34. So the board of directors and I said, this is crazy. We're setting someone up for failure. Let's narrow it down to 3. Top 3. What are the top 3 things? This was the coolest part. The number one, and this played out similarly in both projects, and there's only 9 words to remember. The number one skill characteristic that was cited in these surveys, the next leader we want, 3 words, grace under fire. Imagine that. The number one thing we want out of our CEO, not where they went to college. In fact, their profession, whether they were a lawyer or it didn't matter. That was not relevant. Their ability to stay calm in a world where you're always on a camera. So, composure, number one. Second, your ability to resolve conflict effectively. Another 3 words. Because most CEOs that I work with will tell you 50 to 60% of their time is resolving internal conflict. Just a lot of passion, a lot of opinions, a lot of conflict, but somebody's got to make the call when all of the debate and discourse is done. Who's resolving that conflict without everybody feeling like they've been beat up?
That's right.
People want to know they're heard. They want to know they have a voice, but that doesn't mean you may have a voice, you may have a vote. But otherwise, the CEO is the individual who's making the call, whether you like it or not. I got to make that call. But as long as we can do that respectfully, we're going to get through this. And this was third, Brian. This was like music to my ears, like Star-Spangled Banner. Boom! It wasn't about the skills. It was stylistic. And what they stated, empathetic leadership style. So let me repeat those. Grace under fire. Resolve conflicts effectively. Empathetic leadership style. 9 words. So imagine that. This is the frame of the modern day CEO.
Yes.
If you want to learn to be the next CEO, now maybe this is subject to change over the years. My guess is this is pretty good for the next decade until something changes. This is a really interesting framework for the bogey to have your eye on. If this is what I want to tack to, don't eliminate the other things, but pile on, and all of the things that you learn are not equally weighted. Weight this heavily, because this is what so we know what market demands of your skill set. LinkedIn has told you that. If these 2 projects are a proxy for what you can learn, and leadership is a learned behavior. Some people come more naturally than others, but everybody can learn from it, including me. All of us. I had to learn how to be a better leader. So when we think about leadership, Brian, in the past, we tended to think in the Industrial Revolution and when we fought wars for centuries is think about leadership as a continuum, as something binary. On the very right side, extreme side, think about stylistically command and control. On the complete other side of the continuum, collaborate and connect. We tend to think of that as very googly, very Silicon Valley, very collaborative. So on the one hand, we have the U.S. Army, the Industrial Revolution, command and control your way to be a leader. That does not work anymore. Collaborate and connect on the other side. Okay, that's good. It's valuable, but sometimes it's a little too squishy. And sometimes people feel they want everybody to be happy, don't want anybody to be upset. So we can collaborate and connect to happiness. That doesn't work either. Right in the middle, Brian, that's where emotional intelligence comes in, where somebody learns to be commanding, yet to bring along the collaborate and the connect style of leadership, where you are granting people permission to offer their input, but you do not sway as CEO the decision because you're held accountable to it. But that doesn't mean, nor does it dismiss your need to be able to find the equilibrium between command and control, collaborate and connect. What happens in between characteristically? That's an emotionally intelligent leader. Let me stop there. Does that make sense?
You've explained it better than anyone. I'll just give you credit. And I study a lot of this. And I'm being real with you on that. The fact that you're able to take those 2, because I'm relating and I'm thinking about leaders I've had. I'm thinking about my journey when I've been on one side or the other. And you explained that's real life modern leadership. And I love how you said, look, this is probably, I'm with you. I think this is the next decade, maybe longer, of the successful CEOs. And look, I'm not a CEO, but the way our team runs is our CEO says, you're an entrepreneur. You are the CEO of your team. Run it that way. And so anyone listening out there, even if you don't have the title CEO, come along that journey as you are the CEO of your life, your family, the team that you are working with. And what I would love, it's kind of a follow-up. You explained it so well there. And I know you've created this course because I think people are going to listen to that and go, Okay, I get it. Like I'm sort of following with you. I love that you've taken action. You've actually created a course, right? We were talking about this as for people to learn more. Because like myself, look, I need to learn more, right? I'm not done learning and growing. So,
I think
yeah,
anyone who's successful, I think the first thing is we think of ourselves as lifelong learners, because even now I'm doing a lot of the talking, but I'm not learning anything when I'm speaking. I learn when I'm listening. And in order to, I think, to be good at what anybody does, and I'm an avid reader, I read all the time because somebody can actually teach me something, because I spend all my day teaching. So I want to spend the rest of my time learning something. So let me first state, just in from something you said to everyone listening about these characteristics for the CEO. Brian, I couldn't agree with you more. You are the CEO of your life. But the important part is these skills that I'm talking about in career, think of them as characteristics of a good human being. I know for me, I'd like to think it made me a better husband. It made me a better father. And here I was thinking about, what are the career attributes to climb the ladder? What an added benefit. I simply got better at my ability to relate to my children, to my spouse, to my friends. And even my friends tell me, wow, Chuck, I like the way I love tuning into the way you speak. And I was like, man, this isn't natural. I had to learn all of this. But I'm not doing it because I want you to listen. I'm doing it because I want you to take whatever you learn from me and go to someone else and teach them. But lead by example. Show them how it's done, because if you read from a textbook, you're going to forget 90% of it in 7 days. So it's not a bad thing, but this is retention. So what I've done, Brian, I teach at the executive level. For many of my clients, I really focus on two things. Communication is really public speaking as a method of communication, not necessarily because you're on a stage, but a lot of people spend their days in meetings with PowerPoint. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of a bad PowerPoint presentation, it is soul crushing. It is, and it'll kill your career. I don't care how smart you are. You go in there and you bore people to death with a terrible PowerPoint and a presentation that is anything but powerful and compelling. You think you're informing? Give me a break. Every time you present is an opportunity to inspire, which means raise the game on the standard by which you communicate. People are going to flock to you. And I teach engineers at Columbia who said, well, what's this got to do with engineering? One day you're going to go to your boss and you're going to want $3 million to build the next bridge that no one's ever thought of. Your persuasion, communication, and collaboration skills will be on display. So if you don't study that and you come back to me and tell me how disappointed you were you didn't get funding, this is the opportunity to focus on the right side of your brain to bring your whole self to work. Because to everyone listening, you're a doctor, you're an engineer, whatever you are going to have an ask. You're going to ask somebody for something in your life. They are not going to say yes to you because you went to Harvard or you were the first in your class. Nobody cares. How is that ask relate to their dreams, their goals, and their aspiration? And that's where you learn to be an emotionally intelligent communicator. You find out what makes them tick. And when you go and you ask for the $3 million, how are you going to improve their career or their lot? Instead of thinking of yourself, become much more socially aware, which is what we teach in emotional intelligence. So that's my second expertise, if I can put it that way. Communication, emotional intelligence, in the integration thereof. As a business person, I strive to continually deliver different innovative ways that will help my students and my clients. And the coaching business that I'm in is a very high touch business. I do a great deal of one-on-one coaching, and the people that I'm coaching are very high in their organization. The stakes are very high, and they're under enormous pressure and expectation, and many of them have not been well groomed in communication and emotional intelligence. The common thread is that many people have been promoted on the strength of their technical competence, and then there is a radical shift in the job description. And I can equate that to soldiers. What makes someone a good soldier on the battlefield is not what makes one a good general. But in the Army, the good soldiers are promoted to general, but the generals are not taught to be war fighters anymore. They're taught the art of diplomacy. That's what generals do. So look at the mismatch in what got you here doesn't get you there. So many people struggle in the space between the technical competence that got them to a certain level and now rising to the next level. And that's what I do. I fill in the gap in the leadership development, and it's learned behaviors. It's never too late to do that. So my partners and I then, in our drive to be able to bring this teaching to scale, we have created Brian, I lost for whatever reason. Are we good?
You're good. It just muted. We'll edit it out later.
Yeah, that's so strange. It's doing it on its own. Okay, we'll come back to it. But what? And let me repeat. My partners and I, in our desire to bring all of this teaching to scale, because when you're an executive coach, it is a very intimate relationship with the people that you teach. Yeah. However, there is a way before you get to that spot on the mountain where you've been promoted on the strength of your technical competence. I encourage people to get ahead of it. And unfortunately, you may not know where to turn. How do I get to the top 5 LinkedIn skills? How do I develop communications, emotional intelligence, etc.? So my company is called Climb Leadership, and I called it that. Pretty obvious. I'm a mountaineer. It's part of my brand. And for anybody who's looking at it, you'll notice that the name of my book is called A Climb to the Top. Now, that's another part of my own story. I did something I'd never done before. I'd never written a book. I'd never taught a college class. I'd never climbed a mountain. I'm leading by example here. I didn't know if it was any good, but I had nothing to lose, so I wrote it.
Do it. Yeah.
So what we decided to do then is, and I teach a lot of students from India and China, and in this world of COVID, of remote learning, there has been a lot of demand from many people in my world. Can you provide a course or a series of courses that are self-paced, that are e-learning, that I can do at my own convenience? So on my website is chuckgarcia.com. And there's a very big blue button on the homepage of chuckgarcia.com called Courses. And if you click that, you will see an introduction to the Climb Leadership Institute. We have developed 64 separate lessons divided into 3 modules. And the focus, Brian, is storytelling, the ability to publicly speak in stories, not giving us a laundry list of, a lot of times, Brian, I'll listen to someone give a presentation and it sounds like the ingredients that they had for oatmeal the morning before. Technically proficient, but incredibly boring. So let's flip that. So we teach storytelling, how to prepare for a TED Talk, how to stay emotionally intelligent and calm under the weight of all of these nerves that you are bringing when you're ready to speak. So the whole purpose of that was to give everybody the opportunity to learn in an e-environment for some introspection. But also, and here's the best part, this is not just an e-learning platform. We have periodic Zoom calls where all of the students come onto Zoom that I have learned to master because so much of our world has been on Zoom, where they can test the very things that they have learned in the e-learning platform to come onto Zoom into our community and give us a speech. So we'll start with a 3-minute talk. If you want to do a 17-minute TED Talk, start with 3. Come back the next couple of weeks, go to 5 and go to 7. By the time you get there, before you apply to TED, refine your talk with us. We'll help you get there.
Love it.
So that's called Climb Leadership Institute, and it can be clicked on from chuckgarcia.com.
We will include that in the notes. And I think that is extremely valuable. And what you have shared today and unpacked, I think is, one, I love the part it's going to educate people. It is going to inspire them to think about where am I succeeding? Where do I need to learn and grow? Now they have some of this information. I always say, once you have this new information, what are the actions you're going to take as you follow up? So we've tried to give you some of that. Chuck will include the website that's there. I love what you're doing. I love any closing remarks, anything that you would want to leave people with to be thinking about, as we've unpacked a lot of things today. And so as they go back, they probably, like myself, I'll go back and listen to this again and make my own notes. What would you want to leave people with? Any message we didn't cover?
Yeah, I would like to give everyone a little bit of moment of introspection here. Brian, what I observe, and this is what I see in many of the people in my world, many of them feel they have a little bit self-defeated. They have lost some confidence. They have not performed up to their own expectation. And sometimes that self-defeating isn't meant to be anything other than causing them to be introspective about what the possibilities of their lives are. And I say that because many people bring their past to me for coaching, and they carry the weight of that past with them because they either don't know or don't know how to free themselves from that past. Yeah. My advice, and I take this from the great psychologist Carl Jung, who said, "I am not what happened to me," pause for dramatic effect, "I am what I choose to become." Yes. And my advice is, you make the decision because it's your life. You get to make the rules, but we can't stop you from living up to someone else's expectations. Only you can decide what you want that life to be. And I think as an adult, and I appreciate people had rough childhoods. I'm not insensitive to that. I get it. Whatever that may have been, at some point in our adult lives, we need to stop with the excuses and take the responsibility that we are all capable of much more than we think. Yeah. But in order to be able to achieve that, deciding who or what you want to be is strategic, it's intentional, and it's hard work. If you lean into that, and you find people who can offer advice to help you understand the elements of your life you have to change, they will not change by themselves. In fact, in most cases, things get worse if you don't work on them. So I would say, find someone who can help you. Forget all the technical stuff first, who can help you decide who you want to be. And it's not easy enough to say, go out and be it. That's just too trite. And it doesn't tell you much. That's right. What is it you can focus to be the person you want to be? You don't have to take advice from me. The great Warren Buffett said, when he was asked, and I saw him on Columbia, when people asked, Mr. Buffett, what's the advice? And I know my students, one piece of advice, and here's what they were expecting, Brian. Work harder, follow your dreams, chase your passion. He didn't say that at all. Everybody's working hard. He said, improve your communication skills and you increase your value in the marketplace by 50%. Think about that advice. It's specific, it's actionable, and it's measurable. And this is him. You don't have to listen to me. He's got a lot more zeros in the checkbook than I imagined. He's a wonderful man. But look at what he is offering here. And this is my advice. Pick a starting point. My advice, start on your communication skills. You can do a million other things, but when you learn to become a better communicator, what you're going to find, you're going to see things differently. And here's the best part. People are going to start to see you differently. They will begin to perceive something special in you, and then they're going to want to be like that. If we can create, Brian, that kind of contagion where one person shows their mettle by taking a step into that uncomfortable unknown, that inspires others to do the same. That's how we build communities. So that last piece of advice, how do you measure your life? You measure your life by the lives you touch and the communities you build. And the only way to do that is to get in the discomfort of doing things you don't know how to do. And in your case, Brian, the things you suck at, go out and do it and try. What do you have to lose? Nothing. At least you're trying to become the person you want to be. Communication and emotional intelligence, in my unbiased opinion, is a great starting point.
I love it. What a great way to wrap up a phenomenal conversation. Chuck, thank you. This is one of those I know people are going to go back and listen to. We're going to include the links in so you guys can follow here, but we've left you with things you can go improve today. And so you know better than anyone where you need to dive into. From the 5 skills, the communication, all the things you shared, they are actionable. They are measurable. And if you follow both of our journeys, you'll see that when I started the show 2 years ago, part of that was putting myself completely out there in an uncomfortable space. And we celebrate 2 years this month. And I was not a podcaster. I have no background in radio or media. None of it. So,
me too. None.
Right. Wherever you're starting, guess what, guys? That's all of us too. So join the journey. Let us know what feedback. Always appreciate you guys tuning in. Leave a review. Make sure you go on and let us know any other guests that you'd like to have. This has been a phenomenal one. Chuck, thank you. And I look forward to catching up with you soon, my friend.
Brian, it was an honor and a real pleasure to collaborate with you again. Thank you very much. And to the listeners, thank you for your time and attention. I really appreciate it.
Guys, go out there. It's another edition of the Brian Covey Show. On this one, I'm going to say a little different. Go out there and climb your mountain and get to the top. Celebrate it once you get there and let us know.
Subscribe, rate, and review The Brian Covey Show today. Go to briancovey.com.